I'm grateful for the support of this community and for all of the communities for which I am a part. I recently received a letter reminding me that it is the upcoming fifth anniversary of my graduation from Princeton Seminary and that we were supposed to have a homecoming celebration. Many of us familiar with American traditions know about homecomings for our alma maters, be it a seminary, a college, or a high school. And the homecoming that I've been looking forward to is not going to happen this year. Not in a way that allows me to literally and physically go back and see the places where I grew into ministry, to go and see the rooms where I studied theology, and in particular, a room that is most meaningful to me where I did lots of my pastoral care classes. And in reading this letter, I was brought back to think about the campus and the stories that we heard, and to think about an assignment that we did in my last year of seminary to write about our scars, our physical scars on our bodies, or to write about our tattoos, if we had tattoos, and to think not just about the wounds themselves and the pain that was caused, but to reinterpret those scars and to see what they had taught us, how they might be beautiful, meaningful, and teach us. It's also supposed to be the 10th anniversary and the 10th homecoming reunion for my class of William and Mary, a school that struggles with the American struggle of its entanglement and the enslavement of human beings and the treatment and oppression of Native Americans. There's currently a move to build a monument to enslaved humans at William and Mary. There's something called the Lemon Project going on, and there's the wrestling with the scars caused by being what was known as an Indian school back in the 18th century. It's institutions who are not trying to hide their history and not trying to hide their scars anymore, but trying to wrestle with owning the wounds that were caused and the wounds that we bear. This is a story of restoration and hope that I'm so taken by. And it reminds me of a time when I was living in Washington, D.C., and I took one of my best friends in the world to the Renwick Gallery. It's near the White House. It's a beautiful museum. And we went, and there was an exhibit by the artist Rick Dillingham, who makes pottery that is beautifully sculpted and includes all these spiral artwork, but is also intentionally broken. There's an intentional hole put into the pottery during the firing process, or handle that is intentionally misshapen so that they don't work as pottery. And they might not qualify as beautiful in the historic sense. But the point of this exhibit was to remind us that being broken doesn't mean being bad. Similar to the process of kintsugi in the Japanese tradition of taking the cracks in pottery and gilding them with gold, not to shy away from them, not to hide the scars, but to accentuate them, to make them beautiful, to remind us that sometimes failure teaches us the most and perhaps deserves the most gratitude, as we've heard from Pat. Just as William and Mary is reckoning with its own history, with its failures, our country is reckoning with a history of racism and inequality, and we're paying the price as a people for exposing those scars to one another. As we approach American Thanksgiving this week, I feel like now is the time to name the hurt of not being able to see family, the discomfort of the continued erasure of Native Americans from our data collection, our voting analysis, our history books, to wrestle with the Trans Day of Remembrance, and how often my attention only goes to that part of our community in times of trouble, in times of memorializing. To remember that they are not just statistics, these human beings that we've lost. They are not just wounds or scars. To remember that these hard realities are the broken places in our own human pottery. This week is a theological conundrum. This time is a theological conundrum. For me, as a European American, wrestling with all of this, there's a theory in psychology of the things and the wounds and the bad memories, the parts of our personality that we don't like, the parts of our family history that we don't like, that we can't quite wrestle with yet. We split them off from ourselves. And these split offs are things that we try not to think about, not to own. My schools have had split offs. My country has had split offs. And this congregation has split offs. Parts that we are not always wanting to own or be honest about. For me personally, the parts of myself that I have split off and tried not to own, I've gone on a journey of restoration to try and recapture those, to reclaim some of those, to look at some of those wounds and see how they might be made beautiful. As an act of love, my friends, it is an act of learning. It is an act of self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. And it is an act of grace. It is an act of giving to yourself things that you don't think you deserve. Because being broken does not mean bad. And the parts that we can't see about ourselves, the parts that we won't see about ourselves, our country, our schools, and our congregation, these shadows might just be worthy of our gratitude as well. It is not simply the positive things that are easy to think about for which we should be grateful, and we should, but perhaps learning to love our shadows and to be grateful for those wounds. Maybe that's the next step. To own our history as individuals, as a congregation. I think that is the road to healing and restoration, the themes for our month. The death of Chester McCall, the first Black minister here at Restoration, has given us lots of emotions to wrestle with. We have different memories of that time, different perspectives on the people who are part of this community. It puts our history back into center screen. We might be feeling grief. We might be feeling confusion, relief, sadness, disappointment, the loss of the ability to reconcile for some of us. Now is not the time to shy away from those emotions. Now's the time to be honest about our scars, those that we bear and those that we have caused. Just like Thanksgiving is the time to think about this nation's history, to wrestle with the fact that this house that we own, the sanctuary that we own, sits on traditionally unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape, the original inhabitants, the original stewards of this space. That to think about ownership of land is a hard thing to wrestle with when the land was stolen in the first place. So if you were like me, to be honest about our nation's history and my own kind of colonial tendencies to think about how I own land and the direct parallels to oppression and violence towards Native American people, towards anyone who owned land that was deemed valuable, and that European Americans and colonialists and capitalists took in the name of bringing massive wealth to this country. It causes a sense of guilt in me, and I want to split it off and not wrestle with it. But if now is the time to recapture those split offs, to own our shadows, to learn from them, and find a way to express gratitude. My friends, that is what we call in the business learning to be a prisoner of hope and to work from gratitude. That secret weapon that Pat taught us about, that has so many benefits, that is the social glue of all connection, the mother of all virtues. Gratitude that helps our brains fire oxytocin into our synapses, helps us to feel good and bonded and engaged, that binds communities together, not just on a spiritual level, but on a physical, chemical level. It suggests that gratitude is an intrinsic part of being human, and that to be fully human, we need to be capable of gratitude as part of the very building blocks of our human biology. We often sing a hymn called Olam Chesed Yibaneh. It's Hebrew and it means the whole universe is built out of chesed, this word that has multiple meanings in Hebrew. Often gets translated as kindness, love, mercy, forgiveness, gratitude. And maybe the key to everything is built on gratitude. But the guilt that we feel and the wounds that we have caused and the scars that we bear, when we talk about being grateful for not just the blessings and the good memories, but for the other stuff, for the split offs, sometimes gratitude can be weaponized. And please do not hear me, a European American cisgendered white male, saying that you need to be grateful for the pain, grateful for the fact that your ancestors were enslaved, grateful for the fact that you or we have broken covenant with one another, that we have hurt one another and ourselves. That in and of itself is not something just to heap gratitude on. I say that we are not grateful for our mistakes, yet we can be grateful for the honesty that comes out of it, for the chance to confess, to do restorative work, to ask and seek forgiveness, to learn to be better, and for those gifts that come from the failures, the gifts that come from looking at the holes in our pottery, the gifts that come from analyzing our scars, for that new wisdom. I think we can be grateful for that. We can learn to gild the cracks in gold, to be grateful for the opportunity to try to be our best selves, to come to know our highest selves. Grateful for that unearned grace of life, that the sun rises again and begs us to do better and be better and know better. I'm working on being grateful for that, on wrestling with the pride that I feel in being Texan and the pride that I want to feel in being an American. And I often say that some days I'm not proud to be an American. I'm honored and humbled and grateful, but not always proud. Interestingly, those studies Pat referenced find that the areas of the brain that light up in an fMRI machine where gratitude happens are also the same areas where pride shows up. Not to say that they can't exist in the same room, but just that it can be a little crowded when we let our pride keep us from showing our scars to one another, and we let our pride be consumed with guilt over the wrestling. As my supervisor at St. Elizabeth's Hospital told me about the guilt that I might feel, Guilt is a useless emotion. It creates a self-negating spiral. It only wants you to feel less of it. But gratitude, on the other hand, gratitude. If you are wrestling, as I am, with mistakes, with cracks, with holes in our pottery, and wondering what do we do with this feeling as we get towards Thanksgiving of land of privilege that is unearned. I wouldn't call it a gift exactly, but it is something that we have. Maybe we call it grace. Maybe we call it blessing. Maybe we call it something we don't deserve, but we've got. So what do we do with it? What is our debt owed? Maybe to the original inhabitants of this land, maybe to the wider movement for justice of oppressed peoples. How can we be grateful for that calling? And rather than feeling guilt, let us gild our cracks in gold and make them plain, and understand that gratitude is the mother of all virtues and is the path to healing. Friends, this week, I hope that we can ask hard questions of ourselves and be honest about our stuff. And remember that all of this life is an unearned piece of grace. So what do we do with it? How do we learn to be better, know better, and do better? How do we learn to be prisoners of hope? When you leave the exhibit of the broken pottery of the Renwick Gallery, you go into another room and you look up, and there are incredible spirals of thread that seem to go on and on forever. The guilt of feeling like broken pottery that produces that negative spiral downwards is not constructive, is not conducive. Gives way to gratitude. When in a community, that gratitude becomes love. Love for self, love for others, love for being together. And that love is critical to healing. And the giving way from guilt to gratitude to love to healing, covenantal love, produces an upward spiral, a healing spiral. The guilt that is connected to pride, where pride and gratitude live in the same area, can be undone, can be healed with love. So gratitude is the mother of all emotions, and it births love in our community if we are willing to be honest and open and vulnerable. That path towards healing, towards restoring wholeness, it starts with gratitude. My friends, as we seek out the places within us that feel broken, a reminder that being broken is not bad, does not mean you are useless, does not mean you are beyond restoration. All of us have holes in our pottery because we're human, in need of love and grace, and we are in possession of those tools to create the restorative spirals that come from owning our shadows, dealing with our split offs, and letting the light that is within us shine out of those cracks, out of the broken places, and letting it pour into this community with gratitude and gratitude and gratitude. May it be so.